pretty amazing. Sarah, do you want me to move?
Okay, y'all got ready. Let me just log in here. Casey gonna make it?
No, he still has work. He's out of town. Welcome and good evening to the City of Montgomery City Council Workshop Meeting, Budget Meeting. Today is May 22nd, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order and to note that Councilman Casey Olson is not in attendance, please. With that, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. I did not receive anything for the public forum, any requests, so we'll move right along to the workshop agenda. We're going to go ahead and swap items 3 and 4, so we'll discuss 4 first. So number 4 on your agenda, discussion and presentation on city's CIP and funding options. We have our very special guest here again this evening. We are happy to have you.
Well, we'll get us kicked off. And so James is here to talk through options. We'll give you an overview of where things stand, overview of the things that have been looked at. Really, the whole goal tonight is obviously not making a decision, but you get clarity, get some options here, kind of the bounds that can be worked in and what some options we have to then run additional analysis scenarios and come back with a final kind of recommendation pattern. So if you look in front of you, you'll see a staple packet in front of us. It's pretty short, just a quick kind of agenda of things that we'll cover. We'll talk through where things stand, facility improvements in general, the CO that you'll get in 2023, impact fees for those stands, water and sewer rates, and then tax supported additional capacity, and then finally kind of next steps. So we're just going to start and go through that. So as y'all know, and as we've been talking about at council meetings, there's a lot of and it is continuing to pick up. One thing that you'll see in your packets for next week is we included a pre-development meeting map, just all the people who are calling. And in the past 30 days, I think we've had 6 or 8 new properties that have called looking to develop in the city, which is it's a lot. And so, it's continuing to pick up, and especially as all the cities around us are putting more and more restrictions on, I think more and more people are getting pushed this way since we currently do not have those restrictions in place. So, again, as we talk about the facilities, mainly just focus on your water plant and your sewer plant capacities and how we continue to keep those upgrading and expanding those facilities to stay with, like I say, ahead of with the growth that we have coming. So, the 2 projects that are in the works, we have water plant number 4, which is the new water plant facility up by the Briarly development. And then you have the Town Creek wastewater plant, the first expansion project of that, to 0.3 million gallons a day, it's 300,000 gallon a day facility. And I have a big note number 3 here is there's still more to come. So kind of the timing of that and the location of that, specifically for the water plant number 4 is going to take us a long way into the future. Water plant number 4 provides a lot of value. We're working through some options to try to phase that project to see if we can get some exceptions to help push some of that cost forward on the elevated tank. But our recommendation is still going to be design it, have it ready to go, have the line stepped out, and if we get the state to approve a waiver to give us more time to help defer some of that cost, we will. But that project in itself on the water side will take us a long way. On the sewer side, it's phased. So you have your first phase, which is in design right now with TAP. You have a permit to do the next phase at that plant, and then we're working on the permit for the next phase at the plant behind Lupe and that facility over there. So this will get us down the line, but here, in the near future, we're going to need to start that next phase of the wastewater plant based on projections of today and based on where we stand. So that's why we get ahead and the permit is started. So getting the paperwork in place. Both of those plants were set up, or at least designed, and will be designed to allow for expansion on them at a more efficient cost. One thing that we're working through, especially in the Town Creek plant, is the permit limits. So the state is starting to add more and more stringent permit limits. After some back and forth, they pushed that onto the future phase. So this phase is more of a standard plant, but there's some additional filters and treatment that will be required on the ultimate phase of that facility. So again, costs to come, pushing down the line. But the big items that are included in really this analysis and what we're working with James with is funding water plant number 4 to its full extent and the first phase of the wastewater plant expansions that gets pulled up. So quick recap. So obviously the existing CO funds that y'all issued back in 2023 for $3.5 million, those are going to be all used up with the completion of the water plant 2 project. So there's still some funds remaining in there today, but after that completion, those funds will be expended and used up. Some good news when it comes to overall capacities. Right now, the well that was drilled out there is exceeding the capacities that was expected. So at first test, it was running. The original well that was replaced was 300 gallons a minute. We were hoping to get in the 600 range. So far, the preliminary testing has it closer to the 900 range gallons per minute, which is good from a water production standpoint. It lets us use. One of the problems that has always been with that facility is it can push out a lot of water, but the well that was there couldn't keep up. So we would run that facility dry. But being able to fill it quicker, we can use that facility more to help control the pressures throughout the city. But that's it. So kind of the next piece of this is, your impact fees. So we've talked about impact fees before. We'll continue to talk about impact fees for perpetuity. But so right now you're sitting on a balance as of, I think a couple days ago, about 1.2 million in impact fees that have been collected so far. When we go back and look at the projected when people are going to be planning their developments based on agreements, it is reasonable to expect that you'll have a balance in that account of about 3.3 million by the end of the year if you don't spend any of the money out of it. 5.5 into 2026, 6.25 2027, based on the developments today. So all the prospective stuff, the things that are potential that we don't know about yet, this is just kind of what is today. With the main driver of those being, the things that are, I'll say, the Montgomery Bend Section 3. So that's already been platted. They owe another $300,000 for that phase. We expect Section 4 will likely get pushed into next year, so that's not included in it. The next phase of the Briarly development that we're getting ready to start construction. Some of the Superior Properties development, and Lone Star Ridge, and a couple others that will likely plat. So that's where those funds come from. So they're true projects moving forward. They're either in construction or they have approved plans for construction. So it's definitely reasonable for that to have those funds available at that time. One thing in our analysis, and what James did as well, is these impact fees are not being used right now. So the total amount, the $22 million for the wastewater plant and water plant, we're assuming that between the revenue supported bonds, the water and sewer revenue bonds, and tax supported bonds, that full $22 million is spent. So that's kind of one of those scenario things. Is we can look at, okay, let's use half of our impact fee money to go toward those projects. What does that do to the issuance? What does that do to tax rates, water rates, et cetera? There's 1,000 different ways we can slice and dice that. However, also knowing that there's more phases to come, kind of getting this slug and these first big projects out of the way as we continue to build up that impact fee fund balance to fund, the majority of that next phase of the plan. Both are options. You can also use impact fees to help pay down debt. So if you do issue debt, you can use those impact fees to help pay that down. But again, your financial advisor will give you recommendations on that, on timing and what makes sense in terms of for those. Any questions so far? This is more just kind of a general overview of what's happening.
So you're saying we need $24 million to do the water treatment plant and well number 4?
Plant number 4, correct.
Wow, that's a lot more than I expected. I thought we were looking at like 11 or 12 million for Town Creek, and I was under the impression we could do wells for like 4 to 6 million. So obviously it's got to be higher than that.
So this one includes the elevated storage tank, and that elevated storage tank by itself is a couple $1 million line item. So the first round cost estimate that we received from Baxter and Woodman that was selected to do the design was around, construction versus design, but the total project cost was around 11. That's the project that we're trying to look at phasing to see if we can bring that down. And so now this project out here was a little over $2 million for a well and underground storage tank. It's going to be more expensive out there since you have all the piping and electrical as well. But if we can phase it, let's get the well done, let's get some of the other plant facilities done and wait on that elevated, then that will help kind of defer some of that cost down the road so we can reduce that total.
The elevated is not necessary to have to put the water plant in
It is
to
not
start
necessary
working.
to put it
But
in.
that's the more modern scheme now these days, correct?
So it's by TCEQ rule.
Yeah.
So
I was
once
to
you
say,
get
is that mandated?
Yeah.
2,500 connections is you're required
Yeah.
to have an elevated storage tank.
Okay, that's okay.
So there's what's called a alternative capacity request or elevated storage tank exception that we can put in and request by taking a model and showing the state, here's how we can provide this pressure without the elevated to buy us time. I don't think, based on our growth, we're going to need it. It's more of a timing function to see if we can phase it or see if there's a way to help defer some of that cost. But it's more of a time than an if.
So if we phased it and we've finished everything but that piece, what is the gap period from being finished to, okay, now we need to go ahead and get, is that 3 years, 5 years, 12 years? I know it depends on growth, I get that, but and then how long does it take to get it implemented?
Yeah, for sure. So if we would phase it, we would put all the piping and everything up to it so it's ready to go.
Yep.
So the whole facility we've set up for it. The design would be complete of it. It's going to depend on the state. So if the state approves a waiver to extend that time out, they would put specific requirements. You can delay installing this until 3,000 connections, or 3,200, or 2,501. They would dictate that as kind of part of the model in their review to say exactly what you are and are not.
How likely are they to approve that?
If the model can support it.
Yeah,
If the
okay.
model supports.
So it's
that-
truly data-driven and,
100%.
Yeah.
If the model supports that pressure's
That I
can be
think I
met
know.
without it, up to a connection threshold, they're likely to give you that exception and give you more time. The one thing is, as we talked about before, the city is so spread out, is getting pressure systems far out reaches. The thing that the west side of town has always been lower pressure
Secondary,
flow
yeah.
issues because they're so far away from the water plant that when the last time we kind of ran through all the models and all the different scenarios, we could improve it incrementally on the west side of town by closing loops and adding these pumps here and adding these things. But to really fix it, you put the plant in.
Yeah.
You're able to produce the water on the west side of town, and instead of trying to get water from 1097 to Hills of Town Creek, you're getting water from Ohio High School and serving that.
What's the projected cost increase by phasing it downstream? Because just with inflation alone, you're looking at a significant increase.
I was gonna say, do we lock in our pricing?
Yeah, I wish. I do not have a number from it. It is obviously more. I mean, you're mobilizing, demobilizing the contractor. You have 2 different bid packages that have to go out, and 2 different contractors, bonds and insurance and everything else. So what we'll do, as we kind of work through this, we'll come back and say, okay, here's the pros and cons, here's kind of the likelihood of success, here's what it's going to take from a time and cost to figure that out, and then here's what that cost difference is. So if it's an $11 million project to do it all as one, and it's $14 million to do it in two, and that's only a 2-year time frame in between, again, that's that kind of pros and cons that we'll have to weigh out to make an ultimate recommendation on, does this make sense versus bite the bullet, get it done.
And potentially, we could be collecting that much impact fees to fill that gap too, so.
Correct.
Do that for a 3-year period.
There's a
So,
lot that's
there's
kind of
variables, yeah, for sure.
where,
Okay.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but when you look at the overall, and James will go into the assessed valuation and things for the city, but when you look at just the developments that are here and actively looking at the city. So I think your 2024 assessed valuation from a taxable standpoint was 540, 524 million? 540. When we add up, so the active developments, so Crossing Montgomery, HEB, Lone Star Ridge, Legacy Brook, Mialago, Villages of Montgomery, BCS Capital, Montgomery, Bend, Briarly, and Hills of Town Creek, that's another $822 million worth of assessed valuation. Now that's not all hit at once. Obviously, that's spread out over a 5-10-year period. But these are large valuation numbers. There is more valuation and developments looking at the city or starting in the city today than there's currently completely in the city. So there's and all that additional valuation, additional water and sewer revenue supports the ability to do more funding.
But we definitely want to be in front of it rather than behind it like other places.
Right.
Now, Chris, well, never mind. So personally, I would like to go ahead and annex west, right, on the other side of Lone Star Parkway, and I know that that's Planners, Dobbin Plannersville order, and maybe hoping that they're in a pinch and they need to let us have all of that, right? Because they're at the end of their line. If that happens, or a developer comes and they want to get in, and that happens, are we equipped, I don't know, if 500 houses, are we equipped to take that on even with this? And I guess the reason I'm asking is because I know of a developer that's potentially wanting to do that.
There would need to be additional improvements.
Okay.
Anytime that we
Yeah.
announce there's additional improvements, how that looks and where it comes from, 500 houses is a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, we will really have to look to see where.
Okay.
The other thing that I will note is, as of a couple weeks ago, Conroe has noted that their population is over 100,000. So their ETJ limit, I think, goes from a 3-mile radius to a 5-mile radius.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
And so now where it's stopped on your your eastern boundary, I believe the new maps have it going kind of around more on the west side because of that 2-mile expansion in there.
How far can they go back around? Because I know that they're almost
Or
there.
stopped.
I'll have to go back and look at the maps. I just remember so currently it's stopped kind of generally 149 on the north. And then it went all the way down to Spring Branch, was all up and down kind of the ETJ line on the south. With that 2-mile expansion, it goes, I don't think it was completely around, but it definitely expands.
That's the very thing we've been trying to avoid.
Right.
The last map I saw does cover the majority, if not all, of the west side.
The whole west side.
For real?
Yeah.
At least the majority of it, yes.
But-
I'm pulling up the map.
But with the current legislator that says they can ask to get out of that, and then, but then who knows if that really even means anything, because there's, a lawsuit about that, but what a mess.
Yeah, so Zach just pulled up the map, and it's pretty much the entire west side, including the majority of the J Oak.
So, but you are correct, that law is still in place for the ETJs.
So now we're surrounded by Conroe ETJ.
Correct.
Pretty close.
Pretty much.
But still, our big concern though is getting the water treatment plant online. Really, I see that being number one priority, and well, number 4, we need it, but gotta get the water treatment plant going.
Both of them. Yeah, ultimately, it's both of them, that are needed to
that's what we're doing.
continue to meet the needs of growth. Again, you're okay spot right now, but there's a lot of projected, there's a lot of growth. So kind of moving from there, the next step in this is the how. So how do you fund these things? What are the options? So we've been working with James and his group, and we looked at the water and sewer rates. We've talked about tax supported bonds. We've also, I think we mentioned at a previous council meeting, we submitted project information forms to the Texas Water Development Board for low interest rate loans. I think their current is 2.5%. 2.5 to 3.5% on those loans to the Water Development Board. So the city passed the first kind of phase of that project information form, and now we're just waiting through the process to get the official request to submit the full application for those. So those are all options. But as of right now, kind of these, what the two things we'll talk about tonight between myself and James are really what do we fully control? So we fully control water and sewer rates and being able to issue revenue support bonds. We fully control tax rates and able to support tax supported bonds. So I'll cover the water and sewer rate portion, and then I'll kick it over to James and he'll talk about some of the tax rate options and what it looks like. And again, I'll say it again because they're big numbers to try and fund. It's what are our bounds that we're working with, and then between impact fees and if we get the water development board approvals to get those low interest rate loans, what does that look like, as well as the AV growth and that we see for support. So in your packet, you'll see on the next page a draft summary. We presented this paper? Yes. So same format of what you presented in January when we talked about water and sewer rates. The feedback that we got then was obviously look at putting more of the rate increase on the non-single family users. And so that's what this updated draft is. So I'll go through the numbers, but ultimately, based on no growth in your sales, which again, we know is not reasonable, you're growing, you're going to have more water and sewer sales. The additional revenue generated from this rate increase could roughly support an $11 million bond issuance from what's in here, give or take. So, looking through the document, again, you've seen the format. If you go over to page 2, you'll see the single-family rate changes. So how it changed from the base user to the for water and sewer. And it works its way up, so you're looking anywhere from kind of an average, the average bill for a single family, I think there's one bill that isn't there, right? No. So the average bill for a single family home with this rate increase would go from $52.62 to $63.07. So a 10.5 cent or $10.45 increase per month to the average. When you go over to the commercial side, again, the commercial rates obviously vary very drastically based on the type of development. So when we just do an overall average, that increase is an increase of about approximately $267. For multifamily, you're looking at an increase of approximately $63. Is that right, Steph?
We're broke around $1,000.
Increase on the high end, and then it goes to the institutional and the water and sewer rate. So you go to the very last page, now we'll go back through this. When you compare to obviously the surrounding entities and making sure that we're in line with our rates, that we're not way out of line with what the other cities around you are charging. You look at that very last page, you'll see, okay, for single family residents, for their average usage, we ran it through and says, okay, what is their current bill? What is their proposed bill with this rate structure? What would be in Conroe manually? So single family goes from 52.62 to 63.
What page are you
Yeah, what page are you on?
What
I'm sorry,
page?
page 6 of 6.
Who?
At the very last page.
Very last page, very last summary.
All right.
Shoo, you jumped from page 2 to, you lost me.
There's a lot of details,
Okay.
ultimately,
Yeah.
easy part for me is
Gotcha.
what does the average bill look like for each user? So,
Okay,
single family for existing in Montgomery is $52.62. Proposed in Montgomery with this change is $63. Conroe would be 104 Magnolia. And the same thing kind of carries down for a commercial, multifamily, institutional user. And these include the regional water authority fees and the San Jacinto River authority fees. That we do not pay the San Jacinto River authority fees. We do sell a Lone Star fee. It's part of our rate. That's one of the big drivers of the difference. Is Conroe and Magnolia both have the river authority rate.
So what are these, in table 11, what do these roughly support? What kind of bond? How much?
Roughly 11.6, 11 and a half.
So we've only gained 600 a day since page 1, right? That's what you understand what I'm saying? Page 1, you said we roughly supported 11 million at the rate you gave us back in January. And with these higher rates, we're only going to gain like another 600,000.
Right, it just moves kind of to where it's coming from. So it reduced from the single family and it put more onto the commercial and multifamily users. So it didn't change the overall total that much, but it changed the how it's distributed amongst your users.
Okay.
when you call an average user less than 5,000 gallons, what do you call it?
6,300
2, okay.
as the historical average for a single family. Obviously, there's a lot of variation in that. I think we're looking at that on there. So, we had a maximum, so these are actually based on the actual meter data. So
Okay,
if someone has a leak,
right.
take it with a grain of salt. So the highest bill at your existing rate was a $2,000 bill. Your lowest bill was your base minimum, no usage. So your highest bill would range anywhere from $2,800. Your average user is 63. Your minimum user, so the person who uses just the bare minimum, goes from $2,850 to $35. So there's a lot of people that just use the less than 2,000 gallons, so that kind of user would see a $7 increase.
And we haven't increased since when? Do you remember?
2018.
Yeah.
What?
2018.
2018.
Yeah.
At that time, you did a two-stage increase. You did an increase in 2017. You did another increase in 2018. That was part of a phased plan at that time, but you haven't adjusted rates since then.
Ad valorem or worse.
Right.
So I think now just kind of switching gears, if you don't have any questions on the water rates, again, we're not deciding anything tonight, is James will go through the tax schedule. So we worked together to look to fund that full $22 million between water and sewer and a tax support. So he's done his analysis. He'll go through kind of the assumptions he made on growth, valuation, things like that.
Good to see you. Thank you, James.
What I've just handed out is may look familiar from a few years ago or from prior discussions, but just as 30-year borrowing term. And both of those options we looked at, assuming zero growth in your assessed valuation, and we also looked at a 5% annual growth for the first 10 years. And so the first page lays out some assumptions, the city's outstanding debt. It divides those by, or I guess it breaks out the tax-supported portion and the self-supported portion. So some of the outstanding bond issuances, the city pays for with tax revenue, and the other, a few are paid from utility revenues based on our records. So the top corner of the page, as was mentioned earlier, this is the 2024 tax year value, $542 million. And to note on that, the assumed growth in assessed valuation, the city's been averaging 46% growth over the past 10 years, which is pretty remarkable. But I'm sure you're not surprised.
Horrified. Horrified mostly.
Horrified. All of them, but not surprised. So anyway, these assumptions will feed through to the next page, page 2. So this shows your, again, each your outstanding debt service totals on the columns on the left side of the page. And then to the right of that, under proposed debt service, this is our estimate for, again, funding $10.2 million of the project over 20 years, with no growth in assessed valuation. So we total up the grand total tax supported debt, and then on the right side of the page, we're making a calculation of what the INS tax rate would be on the outstanding debt, the proposed debt, and then we total the INS tax rate. So in this scenario, the proposed debt would be about 15 cents, just under 16 cents, an increase, or rather, the proposed debt would require about 15.7 cents. And your existing debt that you pay from this tax support does drop off a little bit. So just under 2 cent drop off plus 15.7. So next year, assuming the bonds are issued this year, next year's tax rate would be just under 23 cents on the debt service side, not including your M&O pay. And so the following page shows that it's the same scenario, but assuming 5% growth, so the impact on the tax rate is a little less. Pages 4 and 5 show the same 30-year borrowing with no growth and with 5% growth. And just to compare the 20-year borrowing and 30-year borrowing with assuming no growth, looking at next year's tax rate, we go from 20 years to be just about 23 cents, as I said, and for 30 years to be about 20.4%. So, well, the difference in the 20-year term versus a 30-year term would be about 2.5 cents on the difference in the tax rate. So these, of course, are just all rough estimates and subject to change. But I've said before that we'd like to advise our clients whenever possible to pay for utility system improvements with utility system revenues, or if you're redoing roads or building a new city hall, those things don't pay for themselves, so it makes sense to pay tax revenues. But that's, in a perfect world, that's that may be a strategy, but it did occur to me that based off what Chris said, these impact fees are
Can offset.
accruing $6.2 million by the end of 2027. Rough math with 30-year amortization, that's about 9 years of debt service. So, one thing to consider, if you have no other use for those impact fees, the problem with you have money coming in at a later date, but you need money now. So it'd be great if we could just pay cash for it for these improvements, but yeah, that may be one option that I consider that you could with a 30-year amortization pay, you could pay for that service outright 9 years, or you could use the buy down and stretch that a little longer. But
Chris, what are the restrictions on use of impact fees?
So it has to be used for projects that are increasing the capacity of your water and sewer systems. So it cannot be used, let's use water plant 2 for example. It can be used to increase the size of the facility. It can't be used to just replace a tank in kind. So the replacement of that ground storage tank, we cannot use impact fees for. But if the well is going larger, so we could pay some of that well cost because we're making it larger. And so anything that is increasing capacity in the system are eligible to be used, impact fees to be
This 10.2 million, is this the money we're borrowing and based on increase in property taxes? Or
this was just
We have an
looking,
increase.
this was just looking at if the city needed to fund a $10.2 million project this year and intended to pay for it with property taxes.
So the other 11.6 million that we need to make 22 million is gonna come from those water and sewer rating.
That's correct. So it was trying, so this pass of the analysis was obviously doubling this rate increase puts you outside of putting that all on the tax increase side it's already a large, increase or potential increase that's being talked about, obviously includes that. So what is that balancing act between the buckets to be able to fund the projects as the values and as the revenue continues to.
Is it smart to take that 6.2 million at the end of 27 and put it all in to pay off all of the water debt, or is it smarter to continue to squirrel away the money until for a later date?
So you need to use the impact fee funds.
Well, when are they expire? Do they expire? They have a
So
shelf
you
life?
have to use, so I need to look at the exact rule, but everything's based on a 10-year cycle.
Okay.
And so kind of from collection to not, you have to be using up those funds. And you are limited on what you're doing. So
Sure.
we're going to get to a point where we're doing, and we are now, but more and more maintenance
Right.
items that we can't use those funds for.
Okay.
So we need to use them for our expansion
Right.
cost, and then use our normal revenues coming in to support our maintenance and repair.
I mean, I like the 6.2. Relieving 9 years of, that's pretty remarkable. That's good, I think.
Does our current, rates for water and sewer project that we're able to have sufficient income for the maintenance of the infrastructure as it is?
That's included in the bond, or excuse me, included in the budget cycle.
Yeah.
It takes out the maintenance
M&O.
portion, and then it's the additional revenue generated going toward the, and obviously it's not a one-to-one, because the more water we use, the more maintenance costs are going to go up. The more facilities we add, the more maintenance costs are going to go up. This really assumes, again, no growth in the use of water, so that there's going to be that balance. So yes.
So this is not increasing any of our, we keep it status quo today. Except with the water rates, the water rates do increase. And then, but our ad valorem, so is it, our total is 0.40? It stays our tax rate?
No, that's,
Am I reading that wrong?
no, I'm sorry, that was just showing for reference your current tax rates, but this would certainly,
Right.
it would, assuming we didn't change the mill rate, it would likely increase the tax rate, the total tax rate by about 13 cents. 40 cents at the, the 53% range.
Based on the assessed valuation. So, these are assumptions of what we are today and the growth rate. I think we could likely request, updated values from the city, or excuse me, from the appraisal district. See if we get updated certified values, plus estimated values, to be able to tighten up that number, because we know there's going to be growth from the last one.
I'm just, the increase of water and sewer as well as tax rate, so, given the times that everyone's in, $7
just got
a
voted
dozen
in.
for eggs, that's a lot to ask.
There is one other piece that I think could be considered if I'm on the right path here. In being able to use impact fees as a portion towards this next year's debt service payment. So what that does is it helps to reduce your debt service tax rate. If I'm understanding that we can use the impact fees
To buy it down.
to buy that down. Because basically when we submit the information to the tax office, we have to disclose if there are any other sources for debt servicing. And so if we were to use a portion of impact fees towards that debt service, then when they do the calculation, your INS rate obviously doesn't have to be as high because you have other funds that are supplementing the INS rate. But I don't know what that looks like in this scenario. I imagine it, there's only like specific items that we could, specific debt that we could use that for.
Well, the legislation's recent passage of the deduction for 65 and over from $100,000 to $200,000 in property taxes, how's that going to affect us?
Yeah, I don't know yet. We do expect this to impact us, but we don't calculate our rate. We actually have the tax office calculate our rate for
I
us.
understand.
And so I don't know.
I think it's a piece of information we need.
So-
Because as we go forward and looking at the average ages of the population in the city and everything, it may be a big impact.
And also looking at your homestead rate and
Yeah.
kind of how what you're giving as a homestead exemption to, again, we have a lot of value coming from non-single family
Commercial,
homes as well. So, again, there's a lot of ways to slice and dice, which this isn't a one-and-done conversation of, okay, how does that homestead rate change? Where does that shift, and how does that move the needle to balance some of these things out? And then, kind of as Mary Ann said, utilize this debt service, and maybe you can stair step into these tax increases, or you can delay them further so you get the rates out of the water and sewer rates out of the way, and then come back to the tax rate increases, and utilizing these different pots to do that, as well as, if, the assumed interest rate on these are 5.4 for these bonds. If the water bill comes through, those are significant savings there too. If that comes in at 3 or 2.5, but all to be determined. So, kind of next steps. The mic back. We really just kind of initial comments and guidance on what scenario you want. It sounds like, kind of prepare talking, the interest in definitely looking closer to the impact fees and how that could affect stair stepping this out in terms of increase.
I mean, do we increase impact fees?
We have gone through the first round of that, so we did the land use assumptions
Right.
back in earlier this month,
Yep.
we are taking revised impact fee tables and calculations to the P&Z that serves as the CIAC in 2 weeks that has an impact fee increase.
And so if we were able to increase, would that bring that 53 cents down total to like still in the 40s? Would it offset it?
So the increase that we are looking at, I think the last draft was 15%?
Across.
15% increase. So these estimates of impact fee payments are based on your impact fees today.
Yeah.
So no growth.
Are there any state restrictions on the impact fees, as far as how high?
Yes, well, as far as how it's calculated. So you, again, there's a whole spreadsheet, you're only allowed to capture what is growth and capacity, and you're capped at 50% of that number. So we take all the estimated costs, everything keeps on going up. The timing of those keep on going up as well, because as more and more developments come, more and more fit into that 10-year period. So that's driving that number higher as developments continue.
Now, some of the builders pay impact fees up front, right?
So
Are they
what
often?
the current, so the impact fee, or answer questions, yes. The impact fee ordinance is written that it's due at the time of CAP. The development agreements that the city is entering into, we're making those due at the time of plotting, which is obviously before service is provided.
Because if we had the capability of rating them based on when the connections are, then, and as the costs go up, we could increase the impact fees accordingly.
Right, and that's what we're doing. So, we're looking at it on a biannual basis, and as per each section of the plat. So like Briarly, for example, has a lot of plats. They only lock in the impact fees when they plat that section, not the whole development. So as it continues, or any other development continues, it's whatever the impact fees are today. The development agreements that the city is entering into is not locking in an impact fee rate. They're just identifying that they are due at a different timeline than the ordinance.
Everything we can do is use inflation to our advantage is good.
Right.
So then if we just did that, the impact fees raise and that'd be, and you said it'd be like an increase of 15%, then that's 0.46 cents on the rate instead of 53. So that's,
Exactly. Everything helps.
sounds better.
Everything helps and kind of
Yes.
gets us to that, and where, as we continue through this, I think, again, don't correct me if I'm interpreting differently, is really sitting down with James and looking at how we best utilize those impact fees to help the overall,
Right.
and applying those best, so it's not squirreling them away for one big project in the future, but let's see how we put them to use today to help us kind of lessen this burden, push this burden out, and slow step into it versus big increases.
No impact fees is what got Conroe and Magnolia in the position they're in. And I was shocked. I started a mayor's roundtable. We're the only city out of the 7 cities that showed up at impact fees. I mean, I fell out of my chair. I'm like, what are y'all, that's money you're missing out on.
Yeah.
But that's how they get into, Conroe needs 18 wells. At what price tag? I mean, that's a missed opportunity, especially with all the growth. By God, we did something right in 2020. 2019. All right.
Can we scale the proposed impact fee increases so that, let's say go up 15% now, let's say 6 months later, go up another 5%? Can we, assuming inflation rates?
Yeah, for sure. So per the ordinance, you're required to look at them every 6 months.
Okay.
And so CIAC will bring it back every 6 months. Here's the land use assumptions. Here are the project costs. Change, no change. No. And then if there's a change, it then goes through the process to get adopted. Especially as we're continuing to look at annexations, that is automatically something we need to look at, because now we've increased the land use table, we've increased the number of connections, and prices all over the place. With tariffs are it's hard to estimate right now where prices are going to end up, because between Monday and Tuesday,
Yeah,
they're completely different. So, you know, keeping on top of that and keeping those regular updates. So we're on a June and January schedule, roughly, is our every 6 months. But there's nothing, that's a minimum that you have to look at it, not a maximum.
I mean, inflation is a given, it's just a matter of what the rate is.
Correct.
Everyone's somber? It's a lot to take in, it's a big number. But it is depressing, but it's also the price of growth, and I'm more depressed that Conroe has surrounded us than anything.
James, how does our 46% increase compare to some of the others around the area?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think this whole area is growing. Magnolia, Montgomery for sure. But, you know, just that, back in 2014, being under $100 million. I haven't seen a number that big, but it's certainly not going to continue 46% every year, but I think we're going to continue to see.
Well, yeah, especially with Conroe putting a moratorium, and who knows how long that's going to last.
Well, we learned too that we're only at 40% built out, correct? We're only 40% built out, so, yeah, we have lots more room to grow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of available.
You need to say that, I don't want to say that. People know where I live.
That's a pretty big number.
Yeah, it's a big jump.
Check myself.
That's a big jump, that's a big number.
Well, we will
Yeah.
work with James, come up with some scenarios using those impact fee money, and come back to you.
Yep.
Do the conversation.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
You are going to come back with really good news, huh?
Next item on your agenda is discussion regarding FY 2026 annual budget planning. Ms. Mary Ann Clark. Hopefully you've got great news.
All that. Come on, Mary.
That was a hint. See it, say it, say it.
Okay, so as you know, in the first workshop, I don't have any like hard numbers to show you. We've all started our process. Department heads got their budget information beginning of May, and had a week to start like digesting and considering and thinking about things. But what I wanted to share with you this evening is the platform that we're using. So this was part of what was adopted in the budget for this fiscal year, was to move to this ClearGov platform. And so what this is doing for us is allowing us to have a more interactive budgeting process. So between finance and the department heads, we're able to communicate back and forth based on not having to set up meetings to get together or trying to track somebody down. We can do it right through the system. So I set up a sample here so that I can show you a little bit of what it looks like. And then I'm going to explain to you what this all means in the end. All right, so I set up this sample one. This person has access just to debt service and to the hotel motel fund. So what this does is we have a lot of information that has come from Encode into this system. And so right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus on what we had in fiscal 24 for adopted, or excuse me, 25 for adopted, 25 actuals as of March, and then a baseline number that was given basically from finance. It has to start somewhere, right? And so, you know, we always start with current year's budgeted amount rolls over into our planning for the next year. to move over, we have this in progress. So this is what department heads were seeing when they got their budget information back at the beginning of May. So they had this in progress column. So in progress, that number that's coming through is what's this current year's budget. And they're able to change this number, or they're able to increase it by 1%. So if they said, you know, we're going to go up 3% in this area, if they type in a 3 there, it automatically goes up and they can see what that difference is. In the past, when they've asked, you know, what happens if we go up 3%, we literally would have to manually calculate that or send a formula into the Excel spreadsheet and then hope we catch it every time in the next version. So the information that's in here, when we close this in progress round, it'll get a name. So we'll name it like Department Round 1. And then we open up the next. And it will keep all of our progress along the way. But in addition to that, they have the ability to add information in here. So if they want to, this goes back to that communication piece. If we want to be able to talk about why we're asking for this or why we increased, we can put that information in here. They're also able to add a comment, and this is that back and forth between the department heads, finance, like they can ask questions, when I respond to it, they get a message back right away, the same, it's just a back and forth communication. And then the next thing they can do is they can actually add attachments. So we've had departments who have had quotes for certain things, and we're able to actually upload that into this so that we can see it from a planning perspective. And then this information stays within this system that we have access to, so we can go back to it and track it instead of going through my big folder of everything every year to figure out what we had or relying on the department heads. You know, can you go back and find where we have that item? It's already right here in this system.
And all the supporting documents are there on that line.
Yeah, as long as we put them in there, they'll
Okay,
be
yeah.
there. And that'll be helpful for us.
Who all can see those attachments?
Right now,
Everybody?
it's internal. So, and it's only if you have access to your line items. So in this case, this test person only has access to what the line items that I assigned in the debt service fund and in the hotel motel fund. So for example, like finance can see everybody's, right? But chief only has access to the things that pertain to chief. He wouldn't have access to the things that are for water and sewer. Okay, so we can grant that access if we need to. But the things that become important for what becomes available on the public-facing side is when we have information down here in this portion of this section right here where it says notes. If we put something in here, all of the information that we put into this budget is going to filter into a digital budget platform that your citizens are going to be able to see. And if we choose to put notes in here, we can make those notes visible. So for example, on the PD side, you know that you've been hearing Chief talk about how he's moving some things from the general fund over to CCPD. So we're able to put a note in this system that says, like, when you see it, why is this line item 0 all of a sudden this year? If they look at that note, they'll see that note tells them that that item has been moved to CCPD. So this will help the residents as well to be able to see, like when they're looking, they'll have a better understanding of what it is. It'll also help y'all when you're looking at these things to be able to come to us if you have the questions about like what is in that line, and we're going to be able to find it a lot quicker than what we've been able to do currently. So I just wanted to share this with you so that you can see what the department heads are currently doing. I've had really good feedback from everybody that's been using it. At first, you know, it's kind of overwhelming. There's like, I don't know how many columns there are, but I think there's probably 50 columns if we put them all out there, but we can narrow down our view and put the information out there that we need to see or that pertains to us.
So I'm still going to get a paper copy of
We
this?
can certainly get you a paper copy.
Thank you.
This has the ability for us to have reports. We can put it into an Excel. We can do all of those things. I don't know if it's going to be as fancy of Excel as what you've been getting. We will do that to you. It'll have the information. But it will also continue to maintain the history of each one of these portions. back and forth between versions to see what the history is. So it's made to be a more cohesive process, and so that we don't like lose things along the way. So we're super excited about it. What's going to happen in the end of this whole process, it will filter into, it will filter into a platform that's a digital budget book. And this is just an example. So Page, Arizona is one of ClearGov's kind of sample cities that they've used or their case studies. And so there's all kinds of information. This information that's along this line is going to be pertain to us, so it's how we'll build it out. But it will have your information like on these snapshot sheets. So you'll get this kind of information. You've been hearing me talk a lot over the last couple months about our general ledger conversion. That conversion comes into play with this because right now our numbers don't really have any meaning behind them. They don't have any categories to them. Our new numbers are going to have categories. And so those categories relate right in here to tell us where our revenue sources are. It's the same thing when we look at our expenses. So if we look up here on theirs, you'll see that they have, this particular chart is by department. So how much of that general fund budget is from what department? And then as you move through and you see these charts, and again, there's all kinds of different types of charts, types of graphs along the way, but you'll be able to see trends. So there will be a little bit of information in here for the last couple of years.
This also prevents duplicity. I know there's been challenges in the past where, oh, I thought that this was, you explained that that was going to be in this line item, and now you're going down and now that's in another line item.
Definitely
Right, so
helps us. We already noticed that. So, oh, the other thing I didn't show you. So the other feature that is within here is if we know,
The previous chief had like vests in 5 different spots.
What?
Vests? Previous, not you. Not you. You had it in
So-
7.
let's say we're going to look at this contract services line. And I'm already seeing this in some departments where we might have several things that fall underneath here. If they click here, they can add an itemization. They label what that itemization is, and so I'll just put this in here as a we're going to say it's a recurring cost, so we're going to do it each year. And now it pops down here and shows us that this is an item underneath this contract service. And we can have several items underneath there. And then every time we add a amount in here, $400 in here, it pops up to the category above. And so in the process for us, that's how we're able to see, like specific, like under general consulting, and that's always like, what makes up this big line? So we can put that information in here, and we can mark it either as a one-time cost, which means next year we won't see it in the budget planning, or if it's a recurring cost, we'll see it in next year's budget. And we can put that, so like, let's say the KKC contract, for example. If we know it's a 3-year contract, 3 stages, we'll include that contract in here. We know how far out to look for it. So it doesn't rely on one person to go back, look at what's being, what's on the server in that year. This will be here. This will be here for you all moving forward. And depending on your comfort level, we can assign you all the ability to have like reviewer rights. So when there is when we close around, we can give you the ability so you can get in here and poke around and see what it looks like. Your rights are different, like you won't necessarily have access to all of the pieces of it, but at least you would
Sort of like a read-only,
What's that?
sort of like a read-only.
All the pretty
access.
pictures, the graphs.
And one of the questions that has come up from council members, while I've been here, is that, you know, our current fiscal year actual never changes, right, when we start this process. So we pick that 6-month point, we close out March, and then that's the number we put in, and that gives us kind of a good snapshot, where have we come in 6 months. Sometimes that's hard, because you'll see line items where we haven't even spent any money there yet. You know, we don't spend that until month 9, right? We don't spend all of our expenditures equally over 12 months. With this system, because of it being, keeping the record of everything and being collaborative and everybody else entering information, we can actually upload that information of our current financials on a more regular basis. So we can give you more live time figures in that year-to-date actual call. So I know that that's been a question before, because they're like, it doesn't match like my budget reports and all of that. So we can work on trying to help that process.
So as we're moving through this budgeting season, will we be working on a digital budget like this, or will you be presenting, getting information like we've done in the big books before, and we go through line item by line item and do all of that? Or is it?
I would love your feedback.
Okay, I was saying it's whatever we'd like.
Combination
Okay,
of both.
okay,
Yeah. So what I was kind of anticipating is that we would have a combination of both.
okay,
That
Good.
we'll still be able to print out pages for
Good.
you. It may not have all of your columns on those pages.
Right.
But we'll be able to print out the pages, so you'll have, you know, your basic information. One of the things that we hide in here along the way a lot of times is these numbers, because what we really look at is the name, the
Right.
description, right? So we can look at those things, and we can do a lot more modifications of this to make it so that we're not, you know, trying to see little microscopic print on there. Like I said, I don't know that those spreadsheets will look as pretty, because the digital piece is what's gonna look pretty. But we'll be able to, even when we're in here doing these workshops, I'll be able to drill in and look
On
at
the
this so
fly.
that we can see what we have, instead of having to go back and pull out that information and come back, you know, the next week and give you more information.
This is pretty progressive. Did you find this, or how did we
It
find
is.
this?
So I implemented this in my previous city after seeing a demonstration at one of the GFOAT conferences. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah.
And there are different ones out there, but I think for our size city, for the smaller cities, this platform is really, really
Looks good.
cool. So there's a couple of different features that we have with it. So we have the digital budget book feature. So one of the things that will allow, not only in the visual portion of this, but when you, if you decide that you want to print something or theirs might not be set up quite the same way, but you can actually, you'll get a print option in here, and you can tell it what portions you want, and you can tell it if you want the graphs, if you don't want the graphs, if you want to compare it to last year and this year. It'll ask you those kind of questions in there, and then it gives you your table of contents, does it all, numbers your pages,
Great.
does all of those things.
Let me ask you, but what about the historicals? We don't have historicals, obviously, we just implemented this, but will those be put in, or we just say, and go from this year?
So we do go back, the historical data that is in here is all the way back to 22. So we
Okay.
have the 22 adopted and 22 actual.
Is it like high, but it's high level, it's not the detailed?
So it's not going to be detailed,
Yeah.
it's going to be line item.
Yeah, sure, okay.
Yeah, like your line item
Yeah,
summary, it won't be the detail of each line
Got
item,
it.
because that information doesn't come through, you're just budgeting the
Understood.
line item.
Okay.
But you will have, one of the things that this also does for us is it prepares us for being able to go towards a budget award.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things that I would like to do with this city. It's probably at least 2 years off in the horizon. But the way this platform works is it outlines all of the different key pieces that you need in your budget to go after the Government Finance Officers Association budget award. And that's a pretty cool thing for a city to have. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at in the future. Add to all the accolades of the city.
Right? Go get them, Tiger. Bring home the gold.
Right?
We
So,
did that one year.
One of the things that you had touched on, Councilmember Tom, during the question was, like, how do we know what our rate's gonna be, right? The ad valorem rate? Yeah, we don't know. We're not gonna know until the very end of July, beginning of August, and by that time, it's like, ugh, what do we do?
Like-
So we do the best that we can with our budgeting of all of our other revenue sources. So we get, department heads, they work on all of the expenses, and then on this side, we work on the revenue projections and work with them in some cases if they have, like for court, we work with her to figure out, okay, what can we anticipate for this next year for court revenues. So we work on all of those things, and then we leave kind of our outliers, right? We leave last year's ad valorem amount in there, and we see how close we come. And then based on that information and kind of looking at projections, and we, in the background, run some scenarios based on preliminary information that we'll get from the tax office. But yeah, those numbers don't come in until the very end. And of course, the tax office likes us to have our budget to them by mid to late September. So that puts us having to adopt our budget.
And they're a little fussy when you don't get it.
What's that?
And they're a little fussy when they don't get it.
So we try to keep them happy.
Do they have percentages of homestead and percentages of senior over 65 deductions?
I don't know that it's an actual percentage, but I did send over to WGA today. So we get updated supplements. So we just had the updated supplement in the middle of April that gives that house count, property count. I think our homestead exemption was 602 properties. And then it also gives us, so there's some basic data that it gives us. We can ask for more information, if there's certain things we not need, but it does give us how many properties there are. It gives us how many like disabled
Veterans.
exemptions there are. So it does give us that information.
I think it would be handy to have that for no other reason than when we make decisions relative to rate increases and tax increases, that we know who we're hurting.
Yeah. So anytime there's, we get supplements, like I said, I think this was supplement number 13 for tax year 24. So anytime there is a change in property, somebody protests their property, if there's a change in valuation, we get new supplements regularly.
And the other one is to find, because I've actually asked for it a couple of times, is how many exemptions we have, institutional schools, churches, et cetera. It's always good to know how much
I
you're.
think the report has that information, so I can certainly share that with y'all. We can.
I'd like that.
All right. Any other questions?
Is this software just confined to the city departments, or can we use it with CIP?
I'm sorry. Is it confined to city departments or?
Can we use the CIP budget with this software?
So there is a module for the capital improvements. We did not
Have we
add
bought it?
that module. It is something that I would love to look at for the future. It does take, it's a pretty heavy lift to get it to this point. But because it, as you know, your capital projects span multi-years. And so it's a very, very cool feature where you're able to put in your project, and it puts in, if you expect this project to last for 36 months, and you can put in your different stages. It is a great feature, but I knew it was not something that we would be able to get up and running right off the get-go. But it is definitely something to look at for the future.
How much is it?
What's that?
How much is it?
How much does it cost?
I don't know. I don't have.
It's okay. Just a thought.
Yeah.
You can put it in the
I think
estimated
the annual
budget.
cost, I think the annual cost for the digital budget book, the personnel budgeting piece, and the operational budget, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's $18,000. And so when we think about that from an efficiency standpoint and the amount of time and effort that goes into doing
That's
this,
nothing.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the historical piece that will stay with us through the budget process.
Amen.
So, as you know, we've kind of had bumps along the way this year with losing historical information, with not having, continuity of whether it be people or stuff, files, whatever. Sometimes it's just kind of like, oh, we're starting over and like, where did this come from? Or, what did we do in the past? So this is designed to help us do that.
It's all part of growing up.
That's right. It just happens, right? You lose institutional knowledge along the way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Next.
Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff.
Next budget workshop, do you know the date?
I believe it's June 9th.
Right. Was that with a question mark or was that with a period?
That's what I have, but I
Okay.
also have police beside it. So I didn't know if it was.
Chief, June 9th, next budget workshop?
Requirement?
Next budget workshop?
Yes.
June 9th?
June 9th, yes.
Why did I write police by it also? Are we doing the crime thing also?
CCPD?
Crime control that
We
night?
had that actually Monday night,
Is
and we
this,
won't have another one until the 30th of next month.
is that 6
So we
o'clock?
have a June 9th
Yeah,
budget
6 o'clock.
workshop, and then a July 14th budget workshop.
And at that particular one on the 30th, we will be talking to you guys about. but-
Okay. So I can cross out police on June the 9th.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll have our notebooks on
At 6 or 5?
June the 9th?
Yes, June 9th, you will have your first round
Okay.
copy of everything. If you have your binders from last year and you'd like to turn them in for recycling for this year.
I couldn't find mine. I think it's already
I
here.
think we turned
Okay,
I'm gonna just say.
Go with it.
no problem.
Okay.
I have some, but it didn't say budget on it. But I can bring one.
Perfect. That's all I have.
Great job, thank you. Okay. Council inquiry is next on the agenda. All right, with that, then we'll go to the closing agenda. Item number 5, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Fox,
Second.
second by Tom. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, the motion carries at 7:18. We will adjourn.
No bad.
Julovich.
She wasn't-
Julovich.